throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome in to another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, with you for a third consecutive night on the podcast side of things. Really, I mean, go back, just a ton of podcasts been going on. We, of course, had to do one last night for the basketball side of things. But, look, if I didn't have to be on here tonight, I wouldn't be. But when you get a rumor that you originally heard last week that officially becomes true and is confirmed to have resulted in an interview for the head coaching search, you have to come on here and you have to talk about it. And, of course, we're talking about Bill Belichick interviewing for the Tar Heel vacancy. That was confirmed today by Inside Carolina, originally backed up then by Tar Heel Illustrated. So this actually happened. I think there are a lot of people that are stunned, a lot of people that don't believe that this is actually true. No, this interview happened. So I think, you know, there's a lot of different stuff that's going on right now. A lot of people that think this is realistic. There's some people that love it. There's a lot of people that think this is realistic that don't love it. And I think that there is reasons to be on either side of this argument. Ultimately, here's what I would offer you. And a tweet from Stephen Godfrey, who does work all over the country. There's a bunch of different publications that he does write for, most notably the Washington Post. And he's a guy that's very, very locked in when it comes to this kind of stuff. You know, he said that this is really a PR move from both Carolina and from Bill Belichick. And it feels like there really isn't that much mutual interest here. This is more of just a name to try to prop up the job just a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean that it is impossible. That doesn't mean that there isn't a chance that Bill Belichick doesn't get consideration here, because as we saw on the Inside Carolina message board, someone sent me a screenshot the other day and said, "Is this real?" And it was a post from a longtime poster, Mac TTP, on there, and he was laying out a scenario where a couple of Board of Trustee members did say that they thought what would be best for Carolina would be to reach out to Bill Belichick about the job. Now you kind of wonder whether or not they were looking at it in sort of that PR realm, or if they actually thought there should be serious consideration from Bubba Cunningham and the rest of the group that is going through and picking this next head coach. And so really it looks like this is a way for Carolina to prop up a job that, according to Godfrey, a lot of people have been asking why there is not more NIL money here, why there has not been more success here, which certainly isn't the greatest thing that you want to hear about the job, but it makes a little bit of sense then why this is a name that popped up. And from Bill Belichick's side of it, Belichick's a guy that we've heard now from multiple people that he's really just looking to get back into the coaching realm. He has been out of the game this year. He's been doing the Monday Night Football stuff. He usually sits in the entire first half with Peyton and Eli on certain Monday Night Football broadcasts that the Manning cast is given. And so that's really as close as he's been to any level of football this year. And we knew at some point there would be an appetite for him to get back into it. Now, I'm going to be honest, I thought the next time that we heard his name, it would be for a job like the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Giants, not the North Carolina Tar Heels. But there are people that are reporting on multiple fronts, including Diana Orsini, who covers the NFL for The Athletic. A great insider, has broken plenty of stories over the years. She tweeted out earlier this evening that Bill is looking to get back into the game and that he is not going to turn down any opportunities at the NFL level or at the college level. So this is a name that you could see come up multiple times, especially if some of these bigger jobs open up. But, look, Carolina is the biggest job that's out there right now. And I feel like there is a level of interest from some pretty decent names. I'll talk about some of them here coming up in the next little bit. But yeah, that what Godfrey said right there is really concerning. The fact that there could be people that are questioning this job because of the NIL, because we know that it's been put out there by Mac Brown. It's been put out there by Hubert Davis on the basketball side of things. The NIL collective for Carolina is not as good as you would think it would be. With the wealthy alum that they have, with guys like Michael Jordan who own the Jumpman brand and everything like that, you would think that Carolina's NIL collective would be really, really strong. But it really just isn't. I think there are still a lot of old school fans. We do have, especially on the basketball side of things, I think you've got a lot of older fans of the program that simply do not want to buy into NIL. They think that if they don't, eventually the sport will go back to the way that it was. That's not going to happen. It's time to get on board. And I've said it multiple times here on the podcast. Right now, that's the most important thing. That's more important than the Rams Club. That's more important than tickets. If you want to have a competitive product on the field, it used to be about paying into the Rams Club so that you can make sure the facilities are up to date. It used to be about packing the seats and making sure that there were fans there because guys want fan support. They want to play in these big environments. There are guys, especially on the football side of things, where the most important thing to them is the money. And we're starting to see it more in the basketball realm. You saw it on the transfer portal this year when Hubert Davis was out there and was talking to a lot of these big men. First thing they were wondering was, what kind of monetary compensation are you offering? Because if you aren't offering me a specific amount, then I'm not even entertaining your offer. So, I think there is reason to believe that Carolina is a job that a lot of people are interested in, but also have a lot of questions. I do think that is certainly on the table, and it's something that hopefully doesn't stand in the way of them getting a really good candidate in here. Because some of the names that I've seen, some of the names that I, of course, suggested on the article that I put up right after the firing of Mac Brown, I think they would be really good candidates. I think they would fit here. And I think that everything else that you could want is here. You have the recruiting grounds. You have the easier path to the playoff. You would definitely be able to recruit portal kids here in terms of just an interest level because of that easier path. I think, this is also a school that we've heard for a long time. I'm not going to say the term that we've heard, but there are a lot of people that look at this as a place where if you get the right coach in place, you can win. And I feel like Mac Brown showed you that you can win at a pretty decent level here. But there are certain things that you have to tweak from what he did in his second time around to make it just a little bit better to get you over that hump. What Mac Brown said Monday of last week, I don't think was 100% incorrect about the expectations for Carolina should be to make the 12-team playoff. I think that is a range that Carolina can get to. Are they there now? I don't think so. But if you're competing for an ACC championship, if you're competing to make it to Charlotte each year, which I think is the point that you wanted to get to, especially with the type of talent that you were recruiting, then I think that is a safe expectation. And I think you can still recruit that type of talent. And some of these other coaches that have been discussed, these are great developers of talent. A lot of these guys that I've seen that are supposedly interested, that Carolina is looking at and potentially pushing for, these guys are developers of talent. They are just guys that recruit in some of the most difficult areas of the country to recruit in. And so it makes it incredibly difficult for them to get the type of talent that they need to couple that with the way that they develop and make themselves into a team that can compete for a national championship. So now that we've got the Bill Belichick stuff out of the way, I think we can kind of safely move on from that. I don't think let's get a little further along in the process. This was a Zoom interview. That's also a guy that honestly, with the as much football as he's seen, as many different guys as he's worked with, talking with him certainly is not the worst thing that you can do when you're searching for a head coach. But I think when you're talking about guys that look like they are some serious candidates in this race, I do think that there are some really good names. The two that were reported in that article that Inside Carolina put up with about Bill Belichick, that they also confirmed have had meetings with Carolina via Zoom, is John Summerall, the head coach at Tulane, and Glenn Schumann, the defensive coordinator at Georgia. Every time we've talked about the job, we've mentioned both of those guys. And it shouldn't come as any shock that those are the top two on a lot of fans' lists. I think they're two guys that are up and coming. And I think that's really what is most attractive about those guys, because, the thing is, they're not as proven as some of the other candidates that, I put in the home run hires area. But I feel like a lot of people look at those guys and think what they did at the schools that they're at right now is really their ceiling, where with Summerall, with Glenn Schumann, those are guys that I think a lot of people look at and feel like they have a tremendous upside. In terms of the Summerall side of things, Jeff Duncan, who is a guy who covers Tulane out there in New Orleans, he sent out a tweet earlier today. Initial tweet that he quoted his own tweet from the day before. He said that North Carolina is targeting Tulane coach John Summerall and is expected to make a push for him this weekend. He then quoted that tweet again today and said, Summerall is the hottest name in coaching circles. Purdue, Central Florida, and North Carolina have all expressed interest in him. Tulane officials need to step up to keep him at Tulane. That was then followed by another guy who covers sports in New Orleans. And he said, this is CJ Murdoch. He said, he quotes the tweet and says, Jeff doing some heavy lifting on behalf of Summerall's agent. So basically saying that the stuff that he's saying is not necessarily true. This is what he's hearing from one source that is trying to push his candidate and maybe draw in more money for him in the long run. He says he, referring to Summerall, is not interested in Purdue or UCF, and Carolina's offer was underwhelming. Amazing how these narratives pop out of thin air. So I don't know what to really believe when it comes to this. I think that Summerall is a guy that is definitely towards the top of the list for Carolina. I think it's clear that with the success that he's had, with him being a defensive mind, that he would be a good fit. And I do think that he is a guy that's ready to jump to the P4 level. The question is he ready to jump to a P4 school like North Carolina, where, you know, the expectations are going to be higher than they're going to be right out of the gate at Central Florida, right out of the gate at Purdue. You're following Mac Brown, and there should be enough talent on this roster for you to be able to win. So I wonder, you know, with Summerall and with Schumann, are those guys that Carolina feels like can immediately jump onto the scene and have this team extremely competitive? With Schumann, you do have the national championship background of the staffs that he's been on. I think that attracts a lot of people to him. I think he's a great recruiter. That's what people like about him, you know, more than even the fact that he is a defensive mind, which I think is also very attractive to a lot of Tar Heel fans. And Summerall, I think it's the fact that he's just winning at every place that he's at. Back-to-back conference championships could be on the way if he ends up beating Army on Saturday. I will say that the performance against Memphis last week, not the greatest from Summerall's group. So, but still, I think he is definitely a guy that right now is towards the top of the list for Bubba Cunningham and these guys from the multiple reports that we've seen. Now, there's other names that are being brought up that I think are also pretty legit. Another guy that that I talk with about this job sent me some stuff about other guys that are potentially being interviewed by Carolina at this time. Amongst those are Army's Jeff Monken, as I mentioned, playing in the AAC title game. So that one would certainly be interesting. You've got Schumann on there, as well as Freddie Kitchens, the interim coach. Now, here's the thing about Freddie Kitchens. People are going to panic when they hear that he is potentially getting an interview. He's the interim coach. He's going to get an interview. There's a reason why they promoted him to interim. Every job that you end up interviewing for, like every coaching job that you end up doing interviews for, if you name an interim guy, if you don't fire him at the end of your season and you name an interim, that guy is always going to get an interview. The best way that I can point to it is, if you guys are Carolina Panther fans, go back to last year, go back to that coaching search that they did when they eventually hired Dave Canales. Chris Tabor, who became the interim coach because really he was one of the only coaches that remained, and Giro Evero, the defensive coordinator, did not want the job. He got an interview with David Tepper. He was one of the first guys that was interviewed, and it was pretty obvious that he wasn't going to get the job. Freddie Kitchens is a dude who coached 1 year at the NFL level as a head coach. The majority of his coaching career has come at the NFL level. I don't think he's a guy that is going to be able to be a head coach in college. I don't think he connects with the kids. I think NIL would be incredibly difficult for him to be able to handle. And that 6-10 year with the Cleveland Browns, I think, kind of shows you that he is not really that legitimate of a head coach. I don't know game day wise, what is he really bringing to the table for Carolina? So I don't think there's really much behind that. I think that's really just another name that pops up because it's part of the interview process. And then you do have another name that is pretty interesting, an Alabama defensive coordinator, Kane Womack. Now, that's a guy that coached at South Alabama, had okay success, my thing with that is I know he's currently a defensive coordinator for Nick Saban, or not Nick Saban, excuse me, for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Look, I think Kane Womack is a guy that is a really good defensive mind. I think what this shows you is you hear these different names being brought up. Summerall, Schumann, Womack, Bill Belichick. All these guys have defensive backgrounds. Jeff Monken does not. He's an offensive mind, but he comes from systems that really do depend on successful defenses. And everywhere that he's been, Georgia Tech, he was originally on their staff under Paul Johnson. He then gets the head coaching job at Georgia Southern, where they run triple option, and then goes to Army, where they also run triple option. The staple of those teams is that they have really good defenses. That's what helps out, and that's part of the reason why they run the systems that they run. So I think they're showing you that they want a defensive mind. They are sick and tired of this team struggling defensively, and they want somebody that is going to be able to change things on that side of the ball. Now, there are two other names that have also surfaced that I would absolutely love, and I explained this to you guys when the job first came open. There are people that are saying Matt Campbell is tied to the job at this point. I would love that. I think you're going to see, if they win the Big 12 title on Saturday, you're going to see the reason why Matt Campbell is a really, really good coach. Now, ideally, if you're Carolina, you're probably hoping that he doesn't win the Big 12 title. I still think even if he doesn't, this is a guy that has had a ton of success in one of the most difficult jobs to have success in. In that conference, there's a lot of jobs like that. At least in the old Big 12 conference, although the teams that I do bring up are still there. You have jobs like Kansas, Baylor, Iowa State was right there. Before Matt Campbell got there, Iowa State was pretty much a disaster. They had not had any consistent stretches of winning. This is really the first time they've ever had a consistent stretch. And again, he's doing this while having to recruit in the middle of corn country. And his recruiting classes show you why. The state of Iowa does not have a lot of talent. It's really hard to extend your recruiting footprint in the Midwest because a lot of those states don't have a ton of talent. And when you start getting into the areas like Chicago, up into Indianapolis, Ohio, those are incredibly difficult areas to compete with some of those teams in the Big Ten. And yet they have found a way to become a consistent winner in the Big 12 year in and year out. The other name that is tied to the job is PJ Fleck. Someone told me that apparently he is pretty interested in the job. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if he's one of the guys that has brought up NIL, but I would believe that he is a guy that looks at Carolina as probably a little bit of a step up. And again, you look at where that program is at right now. For Minnesota, it almost feels like they have kind of peaked under PJ Fleck. I think with the new Big Ten that has been put together, it is very hard to see that team competing to win a Big Ten title. When you had the old Big Ten and you had the East and West divisions, it was a much easier path. They got to a Big Ten title game during that time. So I do think that he is a guy that needs to be strongly considered by Carolina if there is legitimate interest. I think him and Campbell should be the top two names. I think Summerall probably third, Schumann fourth. And those are the guys right now that I think Carolina should be looking at the hardest. The good news is that of all of these guys that we have brought up, none of them have turned down the job officially. That's the point that you don't want to get to. I've seen it around here with the Charlotte 49ers. 3 candidates have already turned down that job. We haven't gotten to that point with Carolina yet. Now, maybe as we get a little further along and they want to start meeting these guys in person, you could start to see some of these guys officially turn down the job. But as of right now, it looks like the guys that Carolina has shown interest in, outside of Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers, former Carolina offensive lineman, all the other guys seem to have some interest in the job. And we talked about Arthur Smith. That's not really a big loss for Carolina. I don't think that's a great fit, to say the least. These guys, I would be a little more heartbroken if we had news that a guy like Sumrall was going to turn it down. That, a guy, like Fleck just looked at the NIL stuff and said, nah, I don't really think that that's going to work out for me. I think that we'll see how this materializes over the next few days, because there is another person that told me that, I guess maybe it was either on a podcast that he was on, or maybe it was on one of the message boards, that Inside Carolina reporter Gregory Barnes, one of the most locked in guys when it comes to Carolina athletics, even still after he's taken a bit of a step back over there at Inside Carolina, he says that the job will apparently be decided by Tuesday. Now, I don't know if that is a legitimate timeline. I have no idea whether or not that's actually the case. But I think if that is being said by someone of his caliber, then I do think there is reasons to believe that this will actually happen in short order. And I think for Carolina, that's probably the thing that you're hoping for the most, is that early next week, you're able to really sit down with these candidates, go through and figure out which guy you want to offer the job and officially offer it to him. I think, again, some of this stuff will depend on what happens this weekend, especially around, the three guys that are going to be coaching this weekend, with Campbell, with Sumrall, and with Monken. Now, the thing is, with Monken and Sumrall, if those guys end up winning, they are not going to the college football playoff. It's not going to happen. It's going to be the winner of the Mountain West that will represent the group of five that will be going to the college football playoff. So they will not have to worry about that. Whereas with Matt Campbell, he would potentially be preparing his team for a college football playoff game. And, depending on if Boise State wins, I don't think UNLV would have enough to jump the Pac-12 champion, even though they would have a win over the 11th ranked team, as opposed to, Iowa State or Arizona State having wins over either the 15th or 16th team. However that ends up working out, there would be a chance that Matt Campbell would have to be preparing his team to play in very short order in the first round of the college football playoff. So I do think that is going to be a factor. And we'll see if that's a name that we start to hear more buzz around. I'll be interested to see how Carolina sort of handles that. But, for the most important thing is that we are starting to get some news on this front. It was starting to get a little bit concerning that we weren't hearing anything, that it looked like this was an incredibly slow-moving process. And, for those, I'm not saying I was one of those people that wanted us to have a coach by the early signing day. That was never going to happen. The way they have it set up right now is incredibly flawed. And each year you're going to have multiple jobs where that will be open, and kids will just have to commit based on the remaining staff and the fact that, they just love the school. And we saw some of that from Carolina last night. Now, hopefully Carolina can get that coach in soon enough to where they can give Bryce Baker and Austin Alexander, as well as, some potential new targets that they're going to have in that 2025 recruiting class, to try to build something up before the late signing period. I hopefully they get that moving along soon, so that those kids can have some answers, and that the new coach can start hitting the transfer portal. I think that's the biggest thing that Carolina is looking at and wanting to have someone in place for. When the portal officially opens, I think that's when Carolina wants to have their guy, so that they can make a jump on trying to replace whoever is going to leave this roster. You got some guys that have already left. So far, it is just 5. We haven't had any in the last 2 days. So it's really just a group of guys outside of, a guy like Zach Greenberg, who was a rotational piece this year, Caleb Hood, who could have been a part of that backfield next year. It's really guys that just weren't playing at Carolina and are wanting to go elsewhere and get opportunities. Guys that likely would have entered even if Mac Brown was still here. So I think they want to go out there, make sure that they can rebuild this roster if there is a bunch of guys that end up leaving and heading to new schools. And so we'll have you covered with everything that's going on with this coaching search over there at HeelToughBlog.com. I know a lot of you guys are reading that article about Bill Belichick. Make sure you go on there and check that out. Again, legitimacy of it, we'll have to see. I think maybe there is more of a conversation as to whether or not he should be a serious candidate. Read my opinion on that on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Also, we got everything up there for you guys about the transfer portal stuff. Any more news that comes out, any other guys that enter the transfer portal, we will have you guys covered there. I am going to put together a document of the guys that Carolina is interested in. It will be a public Google Doc where I will, sort of go through detail the player that Carolina is interested in. That'll really become handy once the portal officially opens and once Carolina has this new coach in place and they start having legitimate targets that they want to bring in. You'll have one database where you can go to find all of the guys that Carolina has offered or at least express interest in. I'll have that up for you guys this year. I think that's a little bit of a better strategy than putting up an article about every single guy that Carolina expresses interest in. So keep an eye on that. I'll put that on my Twitter page. We'll also, of course, put that on the Heel Tough Blog Facebook page for you guys to check out. And any of the stuff coming out, we'll have bowl projections that'll be coming up. I wanted to put an article up about that this week. Maybe I can get one up either tonight or tomorrow to show you guys what direction some of these guys are heading in. I'm going to be honest, I went through about 12 to 15 different college football bowl projectors, and it's different all across the board. There are very few guys that line up on this, especially with the opponents that Carolina could possibly face. So Carolina is one of those teams all over the board. They could end up in a multitude of different games pretty early in bowl season. Doesn't look like they're going to be in the latter half and doesn't look like they're going to be in Charlotte. So I will have an update for you guys on all of that stuff. And, of course, any other news that comes out from around the Tar Heel football program. Meanwhile, on the basketball side of things, man, what a rough start to the year. Carolina is 4-4. We did not see this coming by any stretch, and I think it's blindsided all of us, and it has people wondering what the rest of this year looks like. No matter what it does, we will have game previews, game recaps for you on the website to check out. And, of course, we will have the Four Corners podcast coming at you all year long. You guys can listen to it wherever you get your podcast. Select games we will have reaction to, like we did last night, where we will go live. So make sure you're always keeping an eye out for that on the Heel Tough Blog Facebook page, and of course on Josh's Twitter page, which is where we stream from anytime that we go live. So plenty of great content for you guys on both the football and basketball sides. The thing we encourage you guys to do, especially right now with everything that's going on with the coaching search, with the transfer portal, all of that stuff, make sure you check the website every single day. You want the latest news, that's the website to go to, HeelToughBlog.com. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. I want to thank all of you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.